I heard Mean laughing outside. The neighborhood boss lady was pointing at my daughter Sophie in her wheelchair. She called my little girl stupid for wanting to be a lawyer. Sophie was crying so hard. This bad woman didn't know she just hurt the smartest kid lawyer in America. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The laughter was cruel and heartless. I was carrying groceries from my car when I heard it, that sharp, mocking sound that made my blood freeze. Through our front window, I could see our neighborhood HOA president, Karen Mitchell, standing in our driveway pointing at my 12-year-old daughter Sophie and laughing like she just heard the funniest joke in the world. Sophie sat in her bright purple wheelchair, her head down, shoulders shaking. Even from inside the house, I could see the tears streaming down her beautiful face. Look at this pathetic sight. Karen's voice carried clearly across the yard. A crippled kid thinking she can play lawyer with her little toy briefcase. How adorable and completely ridiculous. My daughter had been practicing for her school's mock trial competition. She'd been working for months, studying law books that most adults couldn't understand, preparing arguments that would impress real judges. Sophie was born with spina bifida, but her mind was absolutely brilliant. She had an IQ of 187 and dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. But all Karen saw was a disabled child in a wheelchair. "Mommy always said I could be anything I wanted," Sophie whispered, clutching her practice briefcase to her chest. But maybe she was wrong. Maybe I really am just a useless cripple like you said. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My genius daughter, the girl who'd been reading law journals since age 8, who'd already been accepted into a special program for gifted children, was questioning her own worth because of this monster's cruelty. "Oh, sweetie," Karen continued with fake sympathy, "you need to learn to be realistic about your limitations. Disabled people like you should focus on simple things, not complicated careers that normal people do." I dropped my groceries and burst through the front door, my mother's heart screaming with rage. "Get away from my daughter," I roared, charging across the yard. Karen looked up with surprise and annoyance. "Oh great, here comes the enabling mother. I was just giving your daughter some realistic life advice." "Life advice? You were bullying a 12-year-old child." I was explaining reality. That girl needs to understand her place in society instead of having impossible dreams put in her head. Her place? She's a child with unlimited potential. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Please. She's disabled. She should be grateful for any simple job she can get, not pretending she could ever be a lawyer. It's embarrassing to watch." Sophie was sobbing now, her confidence shattered by this woman's toxic words. "Maybe she's right, Mom. Maybe I'm just fooling myself." "No, baby. Don't listen to her. You're going to be an amazing attorney." "How can I be? I can't even walk." Who would take a crippled lawyer seriously? The word crippled, coming from my daughter's mouth, broke my heart completely. This was a child who'd overcome every obstacle life had thrown at her, who'd excelled academically beyond most adults, and now she was using cruel words to describe herself because of Karen's abuse. "See," Karen said smugly. "Even she knows I'm right. Better to crush false hopes now than let her embarrass herself later. You have no right to speak to my daughter that way. I have every right to maintain community standards. Having unrealistic expectations for disabled children reflects poorly on our entire neighborhood." "Community standards? You're not protecting standards, you're being cruel to a child." "I'm being practical. That girl will never be a real lawyer, and pretending otherwise is just sad." What Karen didn't know, what nobody in our neighborhood knew, was that Sophie wasn't just any disabled child with big dreams. At 12 years old, she was already working with real attorneys on disability rights cases. She'd written legal briefs that had been cited in actual court cases. Several top law schools had already reached out to her about early admission programs. My daughter was a certified genius who happened to use a wheelchair. But I wasn't going to reveal that yet. Karen was about to learn exactly who she'd been mocking. "Sophie, sweetheart, show Mrs. Mitchell your latest project," I said gently. "She won't understand it, Mom. She thinks I'm stupid." "I don't think you're stupid, dear," Karen said condescendingly. "I think you're confused about what's possible for someone like you." Sophie wiped her tears and slowly opened her briefcase. Inside were legal documents, case studies, and correspondence from some of the most prestigious law firms in the country. "I've been working on a discrimination case," Sophie said quietly. "A man was fired from his job because he uses a wheelchair just like me." Karen glanced at the papers dismissively. "How cute. Playing pretend lawyer." "It's not pretend. I've been working with Morrison, Caldwell and Associates on the brief. They said my research was better than most law students. Sure it was, sweetie. I'm sure they were just being nice. Sophie pulled out a letter from the law firm. They offered me an internship. Starting next summer. Karen laughed cruelly. Honey, those people were just humoring you. Real law firms don't hire disabled children. I'm not hired as a child. I'm hired as a legal researcher. Age and disability don't matter when you can do the work. Stop living in Fantasyland. Karen snapped. You're disabled. You'll never be a real lawyer. The sooner you accept that, the better. That's when Sophie did something that changed everything. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Hello, Mr. Morrison? This is Sophie. Yes, I'm fine. But I'm dealing with a discrimination situation and I need some legal advice. Yes, someone is telling me I can't be a lawyer because I'm disabled. Could you speak to her, please? Karen's face went pale as Sophie handed her the phone. Ma'am, this is Attorney James Morrison from Morrison, Caldwell and Associates. I understand you've been telling my research assistant that disabled people can't be lawyers. Your research assistant? She's just a kid playing games. Sophie Chin is one of the most brilliant legal minds I've encountered in 30 years of practice. She's 12 years old and already more knowledgeable about disability law than most attorneys. That's impossible. She's been working on actual cases, writing briefs that have influenced court decisions. What exactly are your qualifications to determine who can or cannot practice law? Karen's arrogance began to crumble. I just meant that she should be realistic. The only thing unrealistic here is your discrimination against a disabled child. What's your name and address? I'm considering filing a harassment complaint. Karen quickly hung up and threw the phone back at Sophie. This doesn't change anything, she said, but her voice was shaking. HOA rules still apply to everyone. What HOA rules? I asked. Disabled equipment like wheelchairs can't be stored in front yards where they lower property values. Sophie's wheelchair isn't stored anywhere. She uses it to get around. It's still an eyesore that affects the neighborhood aesthetic. Sophie looked up with tears in her eyes. I make the neighborhood ugly? Yes, Karen said cruelly. Normal families don't want to see medical equipment every day. It's depressing. That was the final straw. Karen, you just committed several federal crimes, Sophie said quietly. What are you talking about? Harassment based on disability, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and attempting to restrict my access to my own home because of my wheelchair. You can't intimidate me with your little legal games. I'm not playing games. I'm stating facts. You've created a hostile environment for a disabled person, which is illegal under federal law. You're just a kid. You don't know anything about real law. Sophie pulled out another document. This is a cease and desist letter. I wrote it myself. You have 24 hours to stop all harassment related to my disability, or I'll file formal charges. Karen grabbed the letter and tore it up. I don't take orders from crippled children. Destroying legal documents is also a crime, Sophie said calmly. But I have copies. I don't care about your stupid papers. You're not a real lawyer. Actually, said a new voice, she's more of a lawyer than you'll ever be. We turned to see Attorney Morrison walking up our driveway. He was a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Karen's car. Who are you? Karen demanded. James Morrison, senior partner at Morrison, Caldwell and Associates. Sophie called me about a discrimination incident. This is ridiculous. She's just a disabled kid. She's my legal research assistant, she's brilliant, and you just committed multiple federal crimes in front of a witness. Karen's face went white. I didn't commit any crimes. Harassment, discrimination, destruction of legal documents, and threatening to restrict access based on disability. That's 4 felonies. She's not really your employee. Mr. Morrison pulled out an official document. This is Sophie's employment contract. She's been working for us for 6 months, contributing to actual cases that have won millions in settlements. A 12-year-old can't be employed. She's classified as a legal researcher and consultant. Age discrimination is also illegal. Sophie wheeled closer to Karen. Mrs. Mitchell, you've been breaking federal law for months with your harassment. I have documentation of every incident. Documentation? You're just a child. Sophie opened her laptop and showed a detailed file. Every time you've made comments about my wheelchair, every time you've suggested I don't belong in the neighborhood, every time you've called me names, it's all recorded with dates, times, and witnesses. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't, this isn't. The Americans with Disabilities Act is very clear about harassment and discrimination. You've violated it repeatedly. I want to speak to your mother. I am speaking for myself. I'm the victim of your crimes and I'm the attorney documenting them. You're not an attorney. You're just a crippled kid in a wheelchair. Mr. Morrison stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, you just used a slur against a disabled person in front of an attorney. That's actionable hate speech. I can say whatever I want. No, actually, you can't. Disability-based harassment is a federal crime. Sophie pulled out her phone and started recording. Mrs. Mitchell, for the record, do you still maintain that I can't be a lawyer because I'm disabled? Yes. Disabled people shouldn't pretend to do jobs they can't handle. And you believe I'm less capable because I use a wheelchair? Obviously. How can you even get around a courtroom? The same way I get around everywhere else. But thank you for clearly stating your discriminatory beliefs on camera. Karen finally realized what was happening. You tricked me. I documented you. There's a difference. Mr. Morrison smiled proudly. Sophie, that was excellent legal questioning. You got her to admit to her discriminatory intent. It's called building a case, Sophie said matter-of-factly. I learned it from studying your successful disability rights cases. Karen was panicking now. I want all of this deleted. I demand you stop this harassment. We're not harassing you, Sophie said calmly. We're investigating crimes you committed against a disabled person. I'll call the police. Please do. They'll want to see my evidence of your federal law violations. Karen pulled out her phone with shaking hands. 911? I need police at Maple Street. A disabled child is threatening me with fake legal documents. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Davis and Officer Rodriguez looked confused as they approached our group. What seems to be the problem here? Officer Davis asked. This disabled girl is pretending to be a lawyer and threatening me, Karen said frantically. Officer Rodriguez looked at Sophie, then at Mr. Morrison. Sir, could you explain what's happening? I'm James Morrison, attorney for Morrison, Caldwell and Associates. This is my legal research assistant, Sophie Chin. Ms. Mitchell has been harassing her based on her disability, which violates federal law. She's 12 years old. She can't be a legal researcher. Mr. Morrison handed Officer Davis a business card and official documents. Sophie is employed by our firm as a consultant. She specializes in disability rights law. Officer Davis examined the papers. These look legitimate. Ma'am, what exactly did you say to this child? I just told her to be realistic about her limitations. Sophie spoke up clearly. She told me I could never be a lawyer because I'm disabled, that I'm an eyesore who lowers property values, and that disabled people shouldn't have careers that normal people do. She used slurs? Officer Rodriguez asked. Multiple times. I have recordings. Officer Davis looked at Karen seriously. Ma'am, harassment based on disability is a federal crime. This is insane. She's just a kid in a wheelchair. She's a person with legal rights regardless of age or disability. Mr. Morrison stepped forward. Officers, I'd like to file formal charges for disability-based harassment, discrimination and hate speech. You can't file charges. She's not even a real lawyer. Sophie pulled out another document. Actually, I passed the junior bar examination last month. I'm certified to practice in juvenile court and discrimination cases. Everyone stared at her in shock. You what? Karen gasped. I'm a licensed attorney specializing in disability rights. The youngest in state history. Officer Davis checked his notes. Is that even possible? Mr. Morrison nodded proudly. Sophie is exceptionally gifted. She completed accelerated law studies and passed a special examination. She's legally authorized to represent herself and other disabled minors in discrimination cases. So when you said you weren't a real lawyer? Karen began weakly. I never said that. You did. I am a real lawyer, and you just confessed to multiple federal crimes to a licensed attorney. The color drained completely from Karen's face. Ma'am, Officer Rodriguez said, you're under arrest for disability-based harassment and hate speech. This can't be happening. As they cuffed Karen, she looked at Sophie with pure shock. You're really a lawyer? Yes. And you're really going to jail. But you're just a child. I'm a child who happens to be smarter than you. My disability doesn't make me less capable. Your ignorance makes you less human. As the police car drove away with Karen inside, Mr. Morrison turned to Sophie with admiration. That was masterful legal work. You built a perfect case. Thank you. I learned from the best. What made you decide to become a lawyer so young? Sophie looked thoughtful. I got tired of people like Karen thinking they could treat disabled people however they wanted. I decided to learn how to fight back legally. And now I want to make sure no other disabled child has to go through what I did. 3 weeks later, Karen was convicted on all charges. She received 2 years in federal prison, a $50,000 fine, and mandatory sensitivity training. Her HOA position was terminated, and she was banned from any leadership roles in the community. But the real victory came when Sophie received a call from the State Bar Association. Sophie? This is Judge Martinez. We'd like you to speak at our annual conference about disability rights in the legal profession. Really? Your case against Karen Mitchell has become a landmark example of how young people can fight discrimination. You've inspired lawyers across the country. I just wanted her to stop being mean to me. You did much more than that. You showed the world that disability doesn't limit capability. 6 months later, Sophie was featured on the cover of Legal Times magazine as the youngest civil rights attorney in America. The article described how she'd overcome physical limitations to become a powerful advocate for disabled rights. But the moment that meant the most to me was when Sophie came home from school with a smile brighter than the sun. Mom, guess what happened today? What, sweetheart? A new girl started in my class. She uses crutches and some kids were being mean to her. Oh no. What did you do? I wheeled over and told them that making fun of disabled people is illegal, and I'd be happy to explain the federal laws they were breaking. Did they stop? Immediately. Then I asked the new girl if she wanted to eat lunch with me. That's wonderful, baby. Her name is Emma, and she wants to be a doctor. I told her that disabled people can be anything they want to be. What did she say? She said she wished she could be as brave as me. So I'm going to teach her about her rights. As I watched my daughter wheel away to help another child, I realized that Karen's cruelty had backfired completely. Instead of crushing Sophie's dreams, it had turned her into a fierce advocate for others. The weeks following Karen's arrest brought unexpected developments that would change our lives forever. The story of the 12-year-old lawyer who defeated neighborhood discrimination had gone viral across social media platforms. Major news networks wanted interviews. Law schools were calling with scholarship offers. Publishers wanted Sophie to write a book about her experiences. But the call that surprised us most came from the White House. Mrs. Chin? This is Rebecca Walsh from the Office of Presidential Communications. The President would like to invite Sophie to speak at the National Disability Rights Conference next month. The President wants Sophie to speak? Her case has become a symbol of how young people can fight discrimination. The President believes her story needs to be heard by policymakers across the country. Sophie was hesitant at first. Mom, what if I mess up? What if I say something wrong in front of all those important people? Sweetheart, you've already proven you can handle anything. You stood up to Karen, you won a federal case, and you inspired lawyers across America. A speech should be easy after all that. But they'll all be staring at my wheelchair. Good. Let them stare. Let them see that brilliance comes in all forms. The day of the speech, Sophie wore her favorite blue dress and had her hair in perfect braids. She'd practiced her presentation hundreds of times, but I could see she was nervous as we entered the massive auditorium filled with senators, congresspeople, judges, and advocacy leaders. When her name was announced, Sophie wheeled onto the stage with confidence that took my breath away. The audience gave her a standing ovation before she even spoke. Thank you, she began, her voice clear and strong. My name is Sophie Chin and I'm 12 years old. 3 months ago, my neighbor told me I could never be a lawyer because I use a wheelchair. Today, I'm here to tell you she was wrong. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. When people see my wheelchair, they often assume I'm broken or limited. But my wheelchair doesn't limit me, their assumptions do. I've learned that the biggest barriers disabled people face aren't physical ones. They're the barriers that exist in other people's minds. She went on to describe her encounter with Karen, the legal battle that followed, and her hopes for the future of disability rights. I became a lawyer not because I wanted to prove people wrong, but because I wanted to make sure other disabled children never have to prove themselves worthy of basic respect. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. Several audience members were openly crying, including federal judges who'd seen it all. After the speech, we were approached by Senator Williams, the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Sophie, that was the most powerful testimony I've heard in 30 years of public service. Would you be willing to testify before Congress about disability rights legislation? What kind of legislation? We're proposing the Sophie Chin Act, a bill that would strengthen protections for disabled children and create harsher penalties for disability-based harassment. My daughter's eyes went wide. You want to name a law after me? We want to name it after the girl who showed America that disability doesn't define capability. 6 months later, Sophie sat at a table in the Capitol building, surrounded by senators and congresspeople, testifying in support of legislation that would bear her name. The Sophie Chin Act passed unanimously in both houses and was signed into law by the president in a ceremony where Sophie was the guest of honor. But even with all this national attention, Sophie never forgot what had started her journey. Every day after school, she spent time helping other disabled children understand their rights and build confidence. She started a nonprofit organization called Wheels of Justice, providing free legal consultation to families facing disability discrimination. Within a year, they'd helped over 500 families and won settlements totaling millions of dollars. The organization's first major case involved a school district that was refusing to provide wheelchair accessibility for a 6-year-old student named Marcus. They're saying Marcus can't attend regular classes because his wheelchair is a disruption, his mother told Sophie during their consultation. They want to put him in a separate building away from other children. Sophie's eyes flashed with anger. That's segregation based on disability. It's completely illegal. But they're the school district. They have lawyers. We can't afford to fight them. You don't need to afford anything. Wheels of Justice provides free representation for discrimination cases. Within 3 weeks, Sophie had filed a federal lawsuit against the school district. Her legal brief was so comprehensive and well-researched that the district's lawyers immediately requested a settlement conference. We're prepared to offer special tutoring for the child, the district's attorney proposed. Segregated tutoring is not equal education, Sophie responded firmly. Marcus has the right to attend regular classes with full accessibility accommodations. He's disruptive to other students. His wheelchair is disruptive, or your staff's lack of training is disruptive? Well, we haven't had time to train staff properly. Then you have 60 days to provide proper training and full accessibility, or we proceed to trial. The school district capitulated completely. Marcus not only got full access to regular classes, but the district was required to hire a disability rights coordinator and train all staff on accommodation requirements. At the victory celebration, Marcus's mother hugged Sophie with tears streaming down her face. You saved my son's future. I just made sure he got what every child deserves, Sophie replied. Equal treatment. The success of the Marcus case led to a flood of requests for help. Sophie was working on cases involving employment discrimination, housing rights, and accessibility violations. Despite being only 13, she was becoming one of the most respected disability rights attorneys in the country. But her biggest case was still to come. One morning, Sophie received a call that would test every skill she developed. Sophie? This is Dr. Roberts from Children's Hospital. We have a situation where a family is being told they can't visit their disabled daughter because she's too disturbing for other patients to see. What's wrong with their daughter? She has severe facial deformities from a birth condition. The hospital administration is claiming her appearance upsets other families. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. They're denying family visitation based on a child's appearance? Yes. The parents are desperate. They want to see their daughter, but they're being told they need to visit during special hours when other families aren't around. That's medical segregation. How old is the child? 8 years old. Her name is Isabella. She's been in the hospital for 3 months recovering from reconstructive surgery. I'll take the case. The case of Isabella Martinez became Sophie's most challenging legal battle. The hospital had powerful lawyers, extensive resources, and public relations teams working to minimize negative publicity. But they underestimated Sophie's determination and skill. She spent weeks researching medical ethics, patient rights, and discrimination law. She interviewed dozens of experts, reviewed thousands of pages of legal precedent, and built an airtight case. When the trial began, the hospital's attorney tried to dismiss Sophie's involvement. Your Honor, we object to having a child represent the plaintiff in this serious matter. Judge Harrison, who had presided over Sophie's case against Karen, smiled slightly. Attorney Chin is a licensed legal practitioner with an excellent track record. Objection overruled. Sophie's opening statement was masterful. Your Honor, this case is about whether medical institutions can practice segregation based on physical appearance. The defendants want us to believe that some children are too disturbing to be treated equally. This is not medical judgment. This is prejudice disguised as policy. She presented evidence of the hospital's discriminatory practices, expert testimony about the psychological harm of family separation, and legal precedent establishing patients' rights to equal treatment. The hospital's defense was weak and contradictory. They claimed Isabella's appearance was medically disturbing to other patients, but couldn't provide any evidence of actual complaints or problems. Dr. Mitchell, Sophie said during cross-examination of the hospital's chief administrator, you stated that Isabella's appearance is medically disturbing. Can you define what makes one child's medical condition more disturbing than another's? Well, some conditions are more visually challenging. Challenging for whom? For other families trying to deal with their own children's medical issues. Have any families actually complained about Isabella specifically? Not specifically, but we have policies. So you created a discriminatory policy based on imagined complaints about an 8-year-old girl's appearance? We were trying to be sensitive to all our patients. By segregating one patient based on how she looks? We weren't trying to segregate. But that's the effect of your policy, isn't it? Isabella gets different visiting hours, different treatment, different access to common areas. All because of her facial deformities. The administrator had no good answer. Sophie's closing argument brought the entire courtroom to tears. Isabella Martinez is 8 years old. She's been in the hospital for 3 months, fighting to recover from multiple surgeries. She needs her family's love and support during this difficult time. But the defendants want to hide her away because they think other people might be uncomfortable looking at her face. This is not medicine. This is cruelty. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found the hospital guilty of discrimination and awarded the Martinez family $2.5 million in damages. But more importantly, the case established a legal precedent that medical institutions could not segregate patients based on physical appearance. As we left the courthouse, Isabella's mother approached Sophie with her daughter in a wheelchair. Isabella's face showed the scars of multiple reconstructive surgeries, but her smile was radiant. Sophie, thank you for fighting for me, Isabella said in a voice soft but strong. Thank you for being brave enough to let me fight with you, Sophie replied. Will you be my friend? I would be honored to be your friend. Watching my daughter embrace Isabella, I realized that Sophie had found her true calling. She wasn't just practicing law, she was healing the world one case at a time. That evening, as we sat together reviewing case files for her next client, Sophie looked up at me with serious eyes. Mom, do you think Karen ever realized what she started? What do you mean, sweetheart? If she hadn't been so mean to me, I might never have become a lawyer. I might never have learned to fight for other kids like me. You think Karen helped you? Not on purpose. But her cruelty showed me how much disabled people need advocates. In a weird way, she gave me my purpose. That's a very mature way to look at it. I'm not grateful to her for being mean. But I'm grateful that I learned to turn her meanness into something good. 5 years have passed since that terrible day when Karen Mitchell mocked my daughter in our driveway. Sophie is now 17, has graduated from high school with highest honors, and is starting her freshman year at Harvard Law School on a full scholarship. She's won over 200 discrimination cases, helped pass federal legislation, and inspired countless disabled children to pursue their dreams without limitation. Karen Mitchell served her 2 years in federal prison and moved across the country after her release. She never contacted us again, but we heard she'd undergone extensive therapy and now volunteers with disability advocacy groups, trying to atone for her past behavior. Sophie never sought an apology from Karen, and she never expressed anger about what had happened. Instead, she channeled that experience into a lifelong mission of protecting other children from similar cruelty. Every case I win, every law I help change, every child I help, it's all connected to that day, Sophie told a reporter last month. Karen taught me that the world needs people willing to fight for what's right. She just didn't expect that person to be me. Today, as I watch my daughter pack for college, I'm filled with pride that goes beyond words. The little girl who was mocked for her wheelchair dreams has become one of the most influential disability rights advocates in American history. And it all started because someone told her she couldn't be a lawyer. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing you do for others. My daughter proved that limitation is just another word for motivation. And Karen Mitchell learned that when you try to crush a dreamer, sometimes you just create a warrior instead.